Thank you. The talk I'm giving today is sort of a joint talk of myself and James Trezees, who's a PhD student at Adelaide Uni who I'm co-supervising, who can't come here today unfortunately. And I'm talking about use of fire to regenerate endangered plants on Fleurieu Peninsula swamps. Fleurieu swamps are listed as critically endangered under the EPBC Act, and they're threatened by clearance, altered hydrology, weeds, and feral animals and overabundant kangaroos. And a photo on the right, you can see the impact of roos and deers on one of the endangered species, nationally endangered species, Allocasuarina robusta, which occurs on the edges of swamps, and this is the impact on the largest non-roadside population in existence. The community also provides habitat for over 100 plant species which are threatened at the national, state or regional levels, and there's the two pictures at the bottom are examples of two such species. What I'm talking about today particularly is the effect of altered fire regime. Lack of fires enabled coral fern and tea tree and certain species of sedges to outcompete ground strata species in these swamps, and this is particularly important since 90% of the threatened plant species that occur in this habitat are small ground strata species, so they're directly infected by this competition. The first area we've worked on is in Ecological Conservation Park. It's a swamp that contains the last population of the naked sun-orchid in South Australia. Prior to our fire, there was only 11 plants in this swamp. It's listed as critically endangered in South Australia, even though it does occur in Victoria, but their nearest populations are 600 k's away. We did a burn. We were planning to do a burn in autumn 2017, but unfortunately it was a late grape season, so we had to put it off to October. So as an insurance policy, half the population was left unburnt as a precaution. At this stage, it's early days, but it looks like the burn was a great success. Of the 5 plants that we had before the fire in the burnt and slashed area, we've got 10 shoots coming up. This compares the area that we kept unburnt, where at this stage there's only 1 shoot coming up. So it looks like the burn has definitely enhanced the species, and very pleasing is the fact that one of the plants that came up is a seedling. A big concentration effort is on Stipiturus Conservation Park, which is the largest conserved example of Fleurieu Peninsula swamp left. This contains 2 nationally endangered species, Prasophyllum murfetii, which is critically endangered, and Allocasuarina robusta, which is endangered, both of them at the national level. And we're planning burns for these species to try and regenerate them. Prasophyllum murfetii, which is called Fleurieu leek orchid, is being excluded by lack of fire, resulting in dense swamp vegetation outcompeting the species. It's particularly important to manage the species in the wild because no one has managed to grow it ex situ as yet. But critical to this regeneration burn is the timing, and we talked to experts, orchid experts, and given that the orchid flowers in December, we've decided autumn's the time to burn, so we're hoping to burn next week or the week after. Very critical to burn this species. It's endemic to Fleurieu Peninsula, and there's only 2 populations left. One of them's in the park, Stipiturus Conservation Park, and you can see this plot on the left shows what's happened to the species since monitoring was started. We've been very lucky to have the Native Orchid Society helping us with this monitoring. Basically from about 2009-10, when there was in excess of 35 plants, the population has crashed down to 4 flowering plants last year. Similarly, the other surviving population in a heritage agreement near Parawa, a few years ago there was 44 plants there. this year, or last year rather, it was down to one plant, and we carefully watched it to try and get some seed, but a rat beat us to it, so it dug it up. So the species in dire straits. So as I said, we're planning a burn in the next week or two to try and regenerate this species. The other species that we're burning in the same burn is Allocasuarina robusta, which is nationally endangered. Stipiturus contains the second largest population off roadsides. Like all she oaks, the seeds is retained in cones until the branches die or the actual plant dies. And I had the fortune of getting a Green Army team to help me with a germination experiment last year, and I got them to collect soil from underneath these plants, and I found that we didn't manage to get any seedlings coming up from the soil, so it indicates the soil seed bank for this species is very short-lived. So, and presently there's no seedling regeneration, so it's critical to actually burn this species while there's seed in the cones. So the burning for both of these species is also incorporated with fencing. So we're going to fence both the Prasophyllum murfetii area against deers and roos, and also the Allocasuarina robusta. But with the Allocasuarina robusta, we've fortunately got a MSc student, Matthew Pearson from University of New England. He's helping us. It's all part of his research. He's put in 30 quadrats, close on 30 quadrats underneath these plants, and he's comparing post-fire regeneration of this Allocasuarina robusta and other species, and he's looking at the treatment of spring versus autumn burn. Fortunately, the northern end of that population was burnt in spring 2017. The bottom part will be burning the next week or two, so we can compare the effect on this Allocasuarina and any other species occurring there of the two different seasons of burn. And then we've carefully positioned the fence so that some of both these treatments and a control area which won't be burnt at all are inside the fence and some are outside, so we can compare the impact of deer and roos on the regeneration of these species after the fire. Matt's not just looking at the above ground vegetation, he's also looking at the soil seed bank, so he's sampled soil cores and he's germinated to see what's in the soil seed bank, and we can compare that with actually what comes up after the fire in the real world. Consultation has been very important, so you can see here a meeting we had to talk about the fire. At that meeting, it was the Council Swamp Recovery Team, the Native Orchid Society, Forestry SA, and various representatives of Department for Environment and Water, including rangers, ecologists and fire management officers. Another species we're working on is Herbatia tenuis, Fleurieu Peninsula Guinea flower. It's listed again as critically endangered under the EPBC Act. It's endemic to edges of swamps, and it's only known from 3 privately owned swamps around Yundi. It's been observed to decline in its natural habitat due to lack of seedling recruitment and mature plants being readily outcompeted by coral fern, and there's a picture of its habitat. As I said, we've got working with James Treziz, who's a PhD student at Adelaide Uni, and we've actually funded him and provided in-kind support. I'm his co-supervisor. He's looking at standing vegetation, comparing that with the soil seed bank at these swamps, and looking at the above ground vegetation before and after these fires. Well, again, he's looking at a fire that was burnt last spring and one that's about to happen in the next couple of weeks in autumn. He's also been sampling soil and growing up this soil in a glasshouse and subjecting it to 2 treatments. Smoke and heat is one treatment, the other is control, no treatment. And as I said, his focus is the Herbatia tenuis, but he's also looking at other plant species. That's the title of his project. His other supervisors are David Payton and Jose Ficelli. His glasshouse experiment method, he's taken 8 cores randomly from each of the 8 wetlands, each of 8 wetlands which contains Herbatia tenuis or potentially contains it. And in addition, he's taken 30 soil cores under Herbatia tenuis plants. And cores were split, half treated with heat plus smoke and half left as untreated controls. And then over 12 months, he identified the seedlings coming up, counted them and removed them. The results were quite stunning. In terms of native forbs, he found that heat and smoke significantly increased germination of the ephemeral native forbs, but didn't actually change germination of the exotic forbs. Herbaceae tenuis, the main focus of the study, dramatic effect there, hardly any. I think they had one seedling coming up in the trays of soil containing, from underneath herbaceae plants. One plant came up, as opposed to the smoke and heat, he got quite a significant amount of plants coming up. Also, he found there were some other threatened species, regionally threatened species, Gonocarpus micranthus and Viminaria juncea, significantly greater germination with the smoke and heat treated soil cores as opposed to the control cores. Looking at the above ground vegetation, the standing vegetation, comparing that with the soil seed bank, he found with natives, in the glasshouse, he managed to germinate 57 native species, and that included 3 species which are regionally threatened: Pultonea dentata, Liliopsis polyamphema, and Aleria granulosa, which weren't found in the above ground vegetation. So in other words, these species were just surviving in the soil seed bank of these swamps and waiting for a burn. Exotics, he found 32 exotic species. However, as I said before, he didn't find any significant increase or decrease in weed germination as a result of the fire or smoke and heat treatment. As I said before, the burns, there was a burn done last spring in a site which contained 10 plants of Herbaceae tenuis, and then in a couple of weeks there'll be an autumn burn of an adjacent site which also contains approximately 10 plants of Herbaceae tenuis. And he's put in plots in both these sites, underneath Herbaceae and elsewhere, 1 metre plots, and he's recorded cover of all species, and he'll be looking at it again after the fire. The preliminary results of the in situ burn experiment were very pleasing. We've only got the results, obviously, of just the spring burn at this stage. As I said, that site only had 10 plants, but we have now over 200 plants, which at just seedlings. We've also fenced half the sites, half the quadrats, to see the impact of roos. Roos really come into these swamps after fire, so the big question is, without fencing, will these herbaceae survive? And you can see also the plot on the left that there's a significant increase in Herbaceae tenuis in the actual quadrats. And finally, James is looking at, with Jenny and Dan at the Botanic Gardens, he's looking at ways of germinating the Herbaceae tenuis. Herbaceae, we have been growing from cuttings, but it's not very reliable. So he's looking at using smoke and heat and gibberellic acid to actually work out a good way to actually germinate the Herbaceae readily, so we can actually do some translocation experiments. And I'd like to thank all these people. Yes, and also, yeah, there's a few people I've missed out there, I'm sure, but particularly the supervisors at the university, some volunteers, particularly Clive and Rosemary Taplin, and another volunteer I'd like to mention who died only two weeks ago was Malcolm Houston. Unfortunately passed away, but he's been very, very active and very valuable in his work, helping with monitoring his funerals tomorrow. And also landowners have been fantastic, and the fire management unit and the SAC Conservation Centre people. Thank you.